Hello and welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Carrie Hazley, Chief of the Emergency Services and Multimedia Branch with the National Weather Service here in Anchorage, here with the Alaska Weather Show for Tuesday, April 7th, 2020. There are a couple of ways you can get a hold of us if you're looking for weather information. The first is the Alaska Weather Information Line. That phone number is there on your screen. It's 1-800-472-0391. If you call that number, it'll take you to a menu system, and then with that you can make a selection for any area in the state for which you want weather information. Another way to get a hold of us is to check us out on the web. We're always there, weather.gov/Alaska. If you go to that website, it'll take you to a site with a map that has the entire state, and all of our warnings and advisories will be highlighted there. You can click on the map and it'll take you to a local forecast for the area of your interest. You can also replace the word Alaska with the words Anchorage, the words Fairbanks, or the words Juneau, and then that will zoom you in to that particular part of the state to make it easier to find the place that you're looking for. And as always, you can email us. We love to hear from you guys. My email address is carrie.hazley@noaa.gov. Let's dive in now and take a look at the warnings that are out across the state. We are seeing winter weather in several places today. Funny, even though it's April, the snow just doesn't seem like it wants to quit. So we've got a winter storm warning out around Kodiak Island and also along the Aleutian Range just to the west of the island there. That warning is valid until 4 a.m. on Wednesday morning. It includes a forecast for heavy snow, 5 to 10 inches, with areas of locally heavier snow where you could see up to as many as 16 inches of snow. We're also looking for gusty winds in that particular area, 45 miles per hour for the gusts, and lower visibility, so travel in that particular area around Kodiak is certainly very hazardous. Further to the east, we also have some warnings around southeast Alaska. The first one there around Yakutat is a winter storm warning valid until 10 o'clock in the morning on Wednesday. With that particular warning, we're looking for storm total accumulations of 5 to 9 inches of snow. And then when we go further to the east over to the Haines and Skagway area, we also have some warnings out. Those are winter storm warnings as well, valid until 4 p.m. on Wednesday. Those are primarily focused on the higher elevations. The towns of Haines and Skagway themselves are not looking for significant accumulation, although they are looking for some. Haines more than Skagway. But the passes outside of the city, places like the Haines Custom Station, and then higher elevations through the passes are certainly looking for significant snow accumulations, looking for about 8 inches in most places with some gusty winds. And actually, gusty winds are really going to be the story over a lot of the Panhandle today. We did put some strong wind in the forecast for places like Juneau and also Sitka, and then a little bit further to the south there as well through some of those channels where we're looking for winds to continue gusting to about 25 miles per hour. So let's take a look at the satellite picture. We do see an area of low pressure just to the east now of Kodiak Island, and several clouds associated with that starting to reach the Panhandle and the Gulf Coast. And then as we go into the later part of today, we see clouds work their way up, at least higher clouds up the Kenai Peninsula, scattered cloud cover across much of inland Alaska as well, also some clouds up along the Arctic coast. Further out west, we see clouds starting to creep their way in along the Aleutian chain. Out around Shimmy, now we have a frontal boundary that's moving in, and you see the clouds associated with that move in on the satellite picture. So here's what this looks like at the surface. We do have that area of low pressure just to the east of Kodiak Island, spreading widespread precipitation across much of southern Alaska today. Let's start by looking at the west side of that storm, where we've got a trough of low pressure that extends up into Bristol Bay and then over around the Bethel area. We're seeing scattered snow showers there, and another concern is we've got some gusty north winds on the backside of that system. That's going to result in some heavy freezing spray in places where we've got open water, as that's now well south of the ice edge, and then winds of about 25 miles per hour there in the offshore and coastal areas. Further to the east, with that area of low pressure, we're looking for that snow around Kodiak Island. Again, we have that winter storm warning. We're also looking for some snow along the eastern sides of the Kenai Peninsula to continue throughout the day today. Some mixed precipitation in some places around the coast. And then down over the Panhandle, we are seeing rain in most places, some mixed precipitation as you get a bit further inland. And then up around higher elevations there, like we mentioned around the passes to the north of Haines and Skagway, continuing to see snow as we go through the day today. That system moving in out west shows up here on the surface chart as well. So overnight tonight, we will see some gradual improvement in the precipitation in a lot of places. Kodiak Island will see the backside of this front go through. They'll continue to see gusty winds out of the north on the backside of that low, but snow will slowly taper off as they get into the morning hours. And again, that winter storm warning for Kodiak is going to expire at 4 o'clock in the morning, so we will see improvement overnight. We'll see some mixed precipitation out over parts of the Gulf of Alaska and the Gulf Coast and kind of the outer edges of the Panhandle, with snow continuing in the inland parts of the Panhandle. And again, we have some of those warnings there around Haines and Skagway valid until 4 o'clock tomorrow. Taking one more look there at that system out in the far western Aleutians, we've got that area of low pressure, weakening frontal boundary as it moves east, but we could see some precipitation there in the far western Aleutians with that system. On Wednesday, the list, a little bit of that system still remains, a few scattered showers around Shemya and there around Adak. They're in the form of rain. Further to the east, continuing threat for freezing spray around Bristol Bay, and they're around the offshore areas from Kuskokwim Bay there. But high pressure does build in. We will see improvement in the weather on Wednesday for a lot of mainland Alaska. It's just going to be the eastern part of the state from the Kenai Peninsula eastward where we're going to continue to see precipitation and winter weather. So from the eastern Kenai Peninsula over to about Yakutat, primarily winter weather where we see snow or some rain and snow mixed in. And then as you get down into the Panhandle, we'll start to see more of a mixed type of precipitation in a lot of places. But again, those higher elevations for Wednesday are going to continue to see some snow as the frontal boundary moves through. Thursday looks like a much quieter day across the state as high pressure does continue to build in over much of mainland Alaska. We'll see clouds clear out. A good part of south central Alaska and interior Alaska should see some sunny skies on Thursday. Should be a nice day in a lot of places. And then out over the Aleutian chain, we'll see some rain move in, some gusty winds move in, and the Panhandle should see some improvement in their weather by the time we get into Thursday as well. Rain in a lot of places, but some winter weather is going to persist for the inside waters and then also in places like Juneau as we get into the day on Thursday. So now let's take a look at temperatures tomorrow morning. It is still cold even though it is April, so let's start up on the Arctic coast first. So Dead Horse tomorrow morning should bottom out somewhere around -10 for a low, over around Nukiagvik -5. On the other side of the Brooks Range there, Battle's -4 for a low tomorrow. Down around Bethel, we'll see a low tomorrow morning of 1 degree. McGrath at 10. Moving into south central Alaska, tomorrow the lows will be down around 20 for a lot of places. And then out along the Gulf Coast up into the 30s. Much of the Panhandle tomorrow will start their day in the mid-30s. We will see some recovery as we go into the day on Wednesday, although temperatures up on the Arctic coast stay quite a bit cooler than I think most folks are ready for here. -7 for Dead Horse, +7, and then a +4 in Nukiagvik. Kotzebue, you'll top out at 7 tomorrow. Nome, you're going to top out at 11. Closer to the King Salmon area, we're going to be above freezing at 35. South central Alaska, we're going to just break the freezing point in some places. Anchorage there around 34. Kodiak, you'll be above freezing, 34 on Wednesday as that low moves out. Most of the Aleutians just above freezing, and then down over the Panhandle, we'll see temperatures getting into the 40s for Wednesday afternoon. So Thursday morning, we do see cold temperatures still in a lot of places. Along the Brooks Range, places like Arctic Village, -10 for the overnight low. That's what we're going to start our day at on Thursday morning. We'll still see minus single digits up along the Arctic coast and around a good portion of the west coast as well. On Thursday morning, you're going to start your day at 4 degrees. There in Kotzebue, if you're in Nome, you should see a temperature at around 10 when you start your day. Temperatures into the 20s along parts of the coast in southwest Alaska, Bethel 13 degrees. And then as we move over towards south central Alaska, temperatures still dropping down in the teens for overnight lows. Thursday morning in Homer, we'll look for 22 degrees to start our day. Up in Palmer, 19 degrees. Further north in the Fairbanks area, we'll look for temperatures in the high single digits to low teens. And then over towards Tok, 5 degrees will kick off your day Thursday morning. As far as some improvement Thursday afternoon, we'll see single digits up on the Arctic coast for high temperatures. 3 degrees in Nukiagvik, 2 degrees over in Dead Horse. And then as we go further south along the Alaska Range, Arctic Village, still very Arctic weather, 11 degrees for your high. For Yukon, you're going to see a high of 23 degrees on Thursday. Down around south central Alaska, temperatures will break freezing. You're going to get into the 30s. Down over the Panhandle, temperatures into the mid-40s.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
I'm meteorologist Amanda Bowen with your aviation weather. For Wednesday morning, we'll see IFR conditions in the western Aleutians as well as much of the coast of the North Gulf, stretching from the eastern Kenai Peninsula all the way through Yakutat and much of the Panhandle. Marginal conditions for the rest of the Aleutians as well as much of the west coast of the state, stretching inland along the Yukon River and up into the Brooks Range. For Wednesday afternoon, we'll see some improvement over the mainland with limited marginal conditions. IFR still over the western Aleutians as well as the higher terrain of the Alaska Panhandle. For Thursday morning, that IFR is going to be stretching all the way from the western Aleutians to almost to the coast of the YK Delta across the Bering Sea. Also some IFR conditions over the western Brooks Range and east along the Canadian border of the mainland, as well as in the higher terrain of the Panhandle for Thursday morning. Thursday afternoon, that IFR in the Bering Sea is going to stay there with stretching from the western Aleutians all the way to St. Lawrence Island and up into Norton Sound a little bit. Mostly VFR conditions for the mainland, though, with some marginal conditions just over the central and western Brooks Range mostly. Also some marginal conditions, spotty marginal conditions possible in the higher terrain of the Panhandle. Looking at pass conditions, Anaktuvuk Pass MVFR improving to VFR Wednesday afternoon. Adigan Pass, same thing, MVFR improving to VFR in the afternoon. Lake Clark and Merrill VFR on Wednesday, but we'll see some marginal conditions on the west entrance of Merrill Pass on Wednesday. VFR at Rainy Pass, but again, marginal conditions along the west entrance. Windy Pass VFR with marginal conditions on the north entrance. Isabel, marginal conditions all day. Mentasta Pass IFR with marginal conditions along the north entrance. Tanita Pass marginal all day on Wednesday. Portage Pass IFR improving to marginal conditions in the afternoon on Wednesday. And Chilkoot and White Passes IFR all day Wednesday. Looking at freezing levels, we've got the surface freezing levels stretching across the Bering Sea, up into the Alaska Peninsula, the Kenai Peninsula, across the North Gulf Coast, and through the higher terrain of the Alaska Panhandle. Warmer air coming up into the Panhandle, making it just to the southern extent of the Panhandle. Also a little bit of warm air popping up into the western Aleutians, just south of the western Aleutians. Icing on Wednesday, we'll see quite a lot of isolated moderate icing across most of the Aleutians and up into areas west of the Aleutian Range along the mainland, as well as for much of the Panhandle. Also some considerable moderate below about 10,000 feet, stretching northwest and south of the western Aleutians, as well as from eastern Kodiak Island out into the northern Gulf on Wednesday. Jet stream winds, a little bit of a different image than we've been showing recently. We've got one streak right along the Kuskokwim Delta coast at about 100 knots, so this is in knots again, out of the northwest. And our main jet stream is going to be out of the southwest across the Panhandle, 130 knots in the northern Gulf to about 140 knots across the northern Panhandle. For 9,000 foot winds, we see that same strongest area of winds over the Panhandle, about 75 knots out of the southwest in the Gulf to 55 to 60 knots out of the south to southwest over the Panhandle. Some other small maxima of winds, about 35 knots out of the northwest along the Kuskokwim Delta, and about 40 knots out of the southwest for the central Aleutians. At 3,000 feet, we still see those strongest winds in the Gulf and over the Panhandle, about 55 knots out of the southwest, just off the Panhandle, 50 to 55 knots out of the north and northwest for the northern Gulf, about 30 knots out of the northwest for the Kuskokwim Delta and Bristol Bay, and about 30 knots out of the south for the Aleutians. Taking a look at turbulence for Wednesday, mostly what we're focused on for turbulence is going to be from the Alaska Peninsula, arcing all the way across the northern Gulf Coast through the Panhandle. So below about 4,000 feet for Kodiak Island and the Alaska Peninsula, with some considerable moderate along the north side of Kodiak Island, below about 6,000 feet for the Panhandle, below about 4,000 feet for the central and a little bit into the western Aleutians. Stay tuned for more Alaska weather after this.
Welcome to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, and joining us once again is our good friend Eric Stevens from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska. Thanks again for joining us, Eric. We really appreciate it, as always.
Happy to be here, Dave.
Thanks. And, we're going to ask you some more satellite questions here, but,
Okay.
since you're a regular guest, we're going to give you a riddle this time, kind of a trick start to the show.
Okay.
How do you see a polar bear in a snowstorm?
Sounds like a challenging question because
Okay.
the polar bear is white and the snowstorm's white.
Yeah.
How do you do that? Well, in the world of satellite meteorology, you couldn't, because the spatial resolution of this instrument that we're going to talk about today has 375 meters resolution, and even the most well-fed polar bear will not be 375 meters across.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to run into such a
No, that'd be a
creature,
bad day.
would you? In the satellite meteorology world, the equivalent would be, how do you tell the difference between clouds and then an area that has no clouds but's covered by snow,
Right.
a piece of ocean that has no clouds but has sea ice?
Oh.
All three of these are white. The
Right.
snow, the clouds, the sea ice, it's all white. So how, using satellite data, can you tell someone where the clouds are and where the clear areas are? This is important for aviators. Mariners want to know, in the ocean there, this white stuff, is that sea ice or is that just a cloud? How do we tell the difference? And it turns out, if you look, say, at a picture of Alaska from the springtime, March or April, and it's high noon, so we're getting a lot of sunshine. If you were riding on a satellite with your human eye, look down, everything's white.
Right.
And we've got a picture of Alaska from early April, and we're seeing some of the lower elevations in south central Alaska are melting out, getting some brown ground there. But otherwise, there's a whole lot of white on the image. What areas are cloudy, but what areas are clear and covered by snow or ice? Okay. It turns out that if we leave the visible spectrum behind a little bit. See, a satellite has multiple channels in the electromagnetic spectrum that it can look at. Part of that's visible light, what we see as humans, but there's a lot going on at other wavelengths. If we add in something that's called near infrared, what we couldn't quite see, but we're getting into that infrared territory, there's a magical property that we can exploit.
Secrets to find.
Oh yeah. This is actually powerful and almost magical, that at a slightly longer wavelength, when the sun shines down on Alaska and then it bounces off back to the satellite, at that near infrared wavelength, it turns out that snow and ice will absorb that wavelength, but liquid water, like liquid droplets in a cloud, will reflect it back. And that's not the way it works in visible. Visible, it just bounces off of all those targets the same. But at near infrared, snow and ice absorbs it, and the liquid will reflect it back. Liquid cloud droplets will do that. And so an image where everything looks white suddenly becomes colorful. And the way this recipe works is that the clouds look pink, and the snow-covered ground and the ice-covered ocean look blue. Suddenly now, we're able to see the polar bear in the snowstorm. We're able to see where the clouds are and where the snow is and where the ice is. This is a powerful advantage. Consider the case zooming into the Bering Strait area. What if you were asked to brief a pilot who wanted to fly, say, from Kotzebue down to Savunga or Gamble, and had to fly VFR, visual flight rules, so they had to stay out of the clouds? Could you use a satellite image where everything is white to provide that pilot any guidance?
It'd be pretty tricky.
Very tricky. And that's why we have to go to this other recipe where the all-white polar bear in the snowstorm becomes more colorful. And now we can tell the pilot, aha, this is a cloud you want to stay out of, but over here, sure, it looks white in the visible spectrum, but what we're doing, we'll show you, oh, this is just snow-covered ground, but it's clear, so you can fly right through there, visual flight rules. Same thing for a mariner who might want to get down to St. Lawrence Island, say, but it has to avoid the sea ice. This product has applicability there as well.
Wonderful.
It's an amazing new technology, so many new channels. The satellite that makes this imagery actually has 22 different channels that it looks at.
22 secret decoder rings.
22 secret decoder rings.
Okay. I liken this to an activity I had in the car when I was growing up. We go on long car rides, and we do all the work in these activity books to, stay calm, cool, and collected for our parents who were trying to get us across the state. But to get the answer, the real answer, you had to apply that red sheet to see the answer or the secret path or whatever the message was in that activity book to get you onto the next page. And it's also like a photography filter, right? If you're taking a lot of pictures, you can apply different colors to see different parts of that image. I mean, that sounds a lot like what you're talking about.
Oh, you know it. The information is in there all along. We just have to combine the channels in a way to reveal what's in there. And by the way, you're dating yourself. So you didn't have an iPad in the back of the car?
No, sir.
Okay. Well, we have, lastly, for dessert, there's a great image of the same kind of recipe. We're looking at South Central Alaska the first week of January. In first week of January, the sun, even at noon, is really low on the horizon, barely up. And in this image, the fun thing is the shadow of Denali. We can see the shadow of Denali over a lower pink cloud deck.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And Denali at 20,000 feet casts a big shadow. So this is another, just for fun, kind of application here. This is called multispectral satellite imagery, and it's the future. And happily, the future is now.
Oh, that is fascinating. And 22 different secrets that can be revealed from just one satellite tool that's floating overhead. Eric, thanks so much for joining us again. We can't wait to have you back and telling us more secrets of satellite technology that are passing over us every single day, many times a day, over Alaska and helping us all the way in many different parts of our lives. So thanks so much for joining us again.
Well, happy to be here.
All right. And thank you for staying with us. We'll be back with a little more weather here in just a few minutes. And of course, we'll have more Alaska weather facts anytime online.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Time for a look at the marine forecast. Taking a look at sea ice to start with, there hasn't been a whole lot of change in the last 24 hours or so. We're still expecting strong southerly winds in the eastern Bering starting Wednesday. That's going to be pushing the sea ice edge a little bit further north for the eastern Bering, particularly the Bristol Bay area, Wednesday through the rest of the week. We still expect that ice edge to recede by about 20 to 40 nautical miles through the rest of the week. Looking at the forecast for southeast on Wednesday, this is when we'll see our highest winds and seas with some gale force winds, 35 to 40 knots in the eastern Gulf, as well as seas in the 14 to 16 foot range. For the inside waterways, still very windy, 20 to 35 knot winds with gusts to about 40 knots, particularly for the north side of the Panhandle. Looking ahead into Thursday, though, lots calmer weather with 15 to 20 knot winds for the Gulf on Thursday and around 15 knots for the inside waterways. Seas also coming down to around 9 to 13 feet for the Gulf and just around 3 to 4 feet for the inside waterways. Looking at South Central, this is going to be on the other side of that low pressure system we have in the northern Gulf for Wednesday. So for the east side, we've got winds 30 to 50 knots, and then on the west side of the northern Gulf, 40 to 45 knots in the Gulf, about 20 knots in Cook Inlet. Seas, again, highest on Wednesday, going to see 14 to 16 feet for the Gulf, around 7 feet even in Prince William Sound, and 4 to 6 feet for Cook Inlet. Looking ahead to Thursday, we'll see the same trend as we saw in Southeast, so everything decreasing for Thursday. Winds coming down to 15 to 25 knots, and seas 7 to 9 feet in the Gulf, around 3 feet in Cook Inlet, and down to just 2 feet in Prince William Sound. For the Alaska Peninsula, they're going to be on the edge of the effects of that low pressure system on Wednesday. So areas around Kodiak Island are still going to be rather breezy, rather windy, with winds out of the northwest 25 to even 40 knots. Gusts to around 40 knots for areas with a little bit lower winds. As we head further south down the peninsula, we'll see a little bit lighter winds, 20 to 30 knots out of the west and northwest. Seas about 6 to 7 feet at the south end of the peninsula, increasing to about 15 feet to the east of Kodiak Island and about 4 feet in Bristol Bay outside of the ice edge. Looking ahead into Thursday, winds and seas coming down to some extent, especially near Kodiak Island. Winds just 10 to 15 knots around Kodiak Island, seas 3 to 6 feet. A little bit further south down the peninsula, winds around 20 knots, seas around 6 feet. For the Aleutians on Wednesday, we'll see winds generally 15 to 30 knots with the strongest winds in the central Aleutians. Generally, winds are going to be out of the south. Seas in the 4 feet to 10 foot range, again with those highest seas in the central Aleutians. For Thursday, seas coming up even a little bit more in the central Aleutians, 11 to about 14 feet. Winds also coming up for the entire Aleutian chain, just about out of the south at 25 to 35 knots. So we'll see some gales there on Thursday. For the west coast, winds light up north over the ice around 10 knots out of the west over Norton Sound, increasing as we head south to about 20 knots. And we'll see seas outside of the ice edge 3 to about 6 feet on Wednesday. For Thursday, winds pretty consistent, not a whole lot of change. So around 15 knots north to about 25 knots south, generally going to be out of the south and west on Thursday. And then for seas coming up a little bit in that 9 to 10 foot range as you get farther away from that ice edge in the Bering Sea. For the Arctic coast, 10 to 15 knots along the north slope and 15 to 20 knots along the northwest coast on Wednesday. As we go into Thursday, those winds are going to generally decrease just a little bit along the northwest coast, just 10 to 15 knots out of the west and southwest, and 15 knots out of the southwest for the north slope. Reviewing what we're looking at for tonight, we have big low pressure system in the northern Gulf that's going to be moving into the Panhandle. So we'll see blowing snow around Kodiak Island and very heavy precipitation along the Panhandle. Thanks so much for watching Alaska TV Weather. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.